Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Wednesday, the 5th of October. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. Apologies for the delayed kick-off this evening. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 224 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed the 4 laws ratifying the Russian Federation's claimed annexation of the occupied Ukrainian regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Russian forces do not fully control any of the 4 areas, and it remains unclear where Russia is attempting to set its new external border. Ukraine has made major and rapid advances this week, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying in an address on Tuesday night that dozens of towns have been recaptured. Russia is at risk of losing control of the strategic towns critical to retaining the city of Kherson and eventually Crimea, Western officials have judged. But they warned the fighting along the Dnipro River will not be an easy rush into constrained territory. The UK Ministry of Defence has said that Ukraine continues to make progress in offensive operations along both the northeastern and southern fronts. In the northeast, in Kharkiv Oblast, Ukraine has now consolidated a substantial area of territory east of the Oskil River. Putin said in televised comments that he signed a decree making corrections to the partial mobilisation drive he previously announced on the 21st of September. The EU has agreed to set a price cap on Russian oil and ban trade in numerous technical and consumer goods as part of further sanctions designed to counter Vladimir Putin's ability to wage war on Ukraine. Russia's foreign ministry has said that the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant will operate under the supervision of Russian agencies after the annexation declaration. Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, is expected to visit Moscow in coming days to discuss the situation at the plant, which has been occupied by Russian forces since the earliest days of the war. Energoatom, the Ukrainian state enterprise that owns the plant, has said it may restart it to ensure safety. Alexander Staruk, Ukraine's governor of Zaporizhia, said that overnight the enemy fired rockets at the regional centre and the outskirts of the city. Infrastructure facilities were destroyed. The Russian TV journalist Marina Ovsyannikova, famous for staging an on-air protest against Russia's war in Ukraine, confirmed she had escaped house arrest over further charges, saying she had no case to answer. The UN Human Rights Council in Geneva was given a presentation by Christian Salazar Volkmann on the unspeakable suffering and devastation inflicted on Ukrainians. About 2,000 videos, photographs and audio files of alleged war crimes have already been submitted to the UN-mandated International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine. And 2 women in Russia-annexed Crimea, including Miss Crimea, have been found guilty of discrediting the Russian army by singing a patriotic Ukrainian song. Liz Truss told UK citizens that she has got your back and she would set out a plan for growth, growth and growth in a conference speech disrupted by protesters asking who voted for her plan. After a fractious party conference and dire opinion polls for the Tories, the Prime Minister attempted to speak directly to the public, saying, "I want what you want." She made the case for cutting taxes as the right thing to do morally and economically, despite having just U-turned over her decision to abolish the 45p top rate of income tax. On the decision to withdraw the policy, she said, "I get it, and I have listened." However, a few minutes later, her speech was disrupted by protesters waving a Greenpeace banner which said, "Who voted for this?" As they were escorted from the hall to boos from the audience, Truss said, "Let's get them removed," and joked, "Later on in my speech, I'm going to talk about the anti-growth coalition. I think they arrived in the hall a bit too early." Truss made her dash for economic growth the centrepiece of her speech in Birmingham, saying not everyone would like her disruptive plan to change the UK, but claimed the country would benefit from the results. However, the pound fell against the US dollar after the speech. Sterling had initially hit a 3-week high against the dollar in early session trading, but soon slipped back amid fears over the government's credibility and fell a further 1% to $1 13.6 cents at the end of the speech. Truss has repeatedly refused to say whether she will raise benefits in line with inflation, triggering a cabinet split as the leader of the Commons, Penny Mordaunt, and the Welsh Secretary Robert Buckland suggested this should happen. Responding to Liz Truss' conference speech, the SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford MP said, "Liz Truss has been a disaster for Scotland, and this arrogant speech demonstrates why Scotland needs independence to escape from Westminster control and get rid of the Tories for good." The Prime Minister has taken a wrecking ball to our economy, he continued, and she is threatening people's mortgages, pensions, and household budgets with her incompetence. It's no wonder polls show she's even less popular than Boris Johnson in Scotland. The speech did nothing to reverse the damage she's done, and it offered no hope to those who will suffer if Tories go ahead with devastating plans to impose £18 billion of austerity cuts, which threaten Scotland's public services, our NHS, and people's incomes. The chief executive of Shell has said governments may need to tax energy companies to fund efforts to protect the poorest from people from soaring bills. Ben van Beurden, the outgoing boss of the oil and gas company, told an energy conference in London, "One way or another, there needs to be government intervention. Protecting the poorest, that probably may then mean that governments need to tax people in this room to pay for it. I think we just have to accept as a society it can be done smartly and not so smartly. There is a discussion to be had about it, but I think it is inevitable." Last week, EU ministers agreed to tap windfall profits of companies and redirect them to customers and businesses as part of an initial energy package. The EU executive hopes to raise €140 billion through the levies. The bloc also set a goal to reduce power consumption. Earlier this year, the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, announced a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas operators in an effort to raise £5 billion. However, Liz Truss has so far refused to extend this to power generators, despite needing to fund her energy price guarantee, which limits bills. The EU has also discussed capping the price of natural gas and power in a bid to protect consumers. Van Beurden said this may hamper efforts to bring more gas into Europe as the countries attempt to replace a shortfall in Russian gas after the invasion of Ukraine. More than 330,000 excess deaths in the UK in recent years can be attributed to spending cuts to public services and benefits introduced by a UK government pursuing austerity policies, according to an academic study. The authors of the study suggest additional deaths between 2012 and 2019, prior to the COVID pandemic, reflect an increase in people dying prematurely after experiencing reduced income, ill health, poor nutrition and housing, and social isolation. Previously improving mortality trends started to change for the worse after austerity policies introduced in 2010, when tens of billions of pounds began to be cut from public spending by the Tory-led coalition government, the study said. The study, published by the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, found that there were 334,327 excess deaths beyond the expected number in England, Wales and Scotland over the 8-year period. In Scotland, 12,735 excess deaths were recorded amongst men and 6,564 amongst women, making a total of 19,299 excess deaths. The findings come as the current Conservative government signalled a fresh round of major public spending reductions after the financial crisis precipitated by its mini-budget, including proposals to impose a real terms cut to benefits for millions of working-age people. The paper, led by the University of Glasgow and the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, concluded that there was a clear and urgent need for such policies to be reversed and new strategies to be implemented which protect the most vulnerable in society. The SNP MP Barry Black has urged the Prime Minister to recall Parliament so the UK government can immediately scrap its cruel austerity measures to save lives, and has reminded people in Scotland they can have a better, safer future with independence. She has also called on Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross to stand up for Scotland by denouncing the recent Tory budget and calling on the UK government to stand by its promise to uprate benefits in line with inflation. The Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, has today confirmed that a decision has been made not to renew Serco's Caledonian Sleeper contract. In an answer to Parliament, Ms Gilruth said, "I can confirm that today Serco Caledonian Sleepers Limited has been advised that its proposal to rebase the franchise agreement with Scottish ministers for the provision of Caledonian sleeper rail services has been rejected on the grounds of not representing value for money to the public." Additionally, I can confirm that a notice was served today which confirms that the Scottish ministers will terminate the franchise agreement with Serco Caledonian Sleepers Limited on the 25th of June 2023. Work is underway to determine arrangements for the continued provision of Caledonian sleeper rail services beyond that date, and this will be updated to Parliament once determined. Suella Braverman's plan to stop people entering the UK through irregular routes from claiming asylum could be in breach of the Refugee Convention, the United Nations Refugee Agency has said. The Home Secretary is reportedly drawing up a bill designed to create a blanket ban on anyone who enters the UK illegally, including by small boats, from claiming refuge. But the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has said that any such law would almost certainly breach the Refugee Convention, the agreement that has protected refugees since 1951 and of which the UK is a signatory. The Convention says no refugee should be returned to a country where they face serious threats to their life or freedom, known as the principle of non-refoulement, and stipulates that, subject to specific exceptions, refugees should not be penalised for their illegal entries or stays. A spokesperson for the UNHCR said it was concerned by the UK Home Secretary's announcement that those who arrive in the United Kingdom other than through safe, regular routes would no longer have access to the UK under proposed legislative reforms. Access to asylum should never be contingent on mode of arrival or nationality. The only way to establish whether people are refugees is through a fair and efficient determination of their claims, for which the UK has a clear responsibility, the spokesperson said. Meanwhile, the SNP has accused Labour of trying to out-Tory the Tories on immigration after a senior Labour figure described the lack of deportations was 12 years of Tory failure. The SNP's immigration spokesperson, Anne McLaughlin MP, said that Labour are becoming more like the Tory party by the day. That's after Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said in an interview with Sky News that the problem is the UK government are not deporting people and that they should be getting people out of the country. The Church of England has suffered from a culture of deference, inertia, misogyny, protectionism and victim blaming, a 3-year internal review of abuse cases has found. Almost 400 new cases involving actions by clergy, officials and volunteers against children and vulnerable adults were uncovered in the most extensive review of personnel records ever undertaken. In a foreword to the review team's 129-page report, published today, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York wrote of the great sadness and profound shame that we, again and again, come face to face with the brokenness and failings of our Church. The review led to 26 national recommendations, including the establishment of a victims' charter to enable children to be truly heard when they are expressing distress or communicating that something is wrong. The review team trawled through more than 75,000 files, some dating back to the 1940s, across all of the Church of England's 42 dioceses, as well as the Archbishop's headquarters in London and York. Allegations of abuse were often dealt with informally, without appropriate investigations, records, or referrals to professional bodies. Of the 383 new cases found during the review, 168 related to children, 149 to vulnerable adults, and 27 were recorded as both. The remainder had no recorded data. No details of the cases were published in the report, but the Church said that they have all been referred to diocese safeguarding teams or, where appropriate, statutory authorities. The review of past cases is the second carried out by the Church after the first in 2009 was found to have shortcomings. The purpose of the second review was to identify institutional failings in the handling of abuse allegations and to assess risks. Justin Welby and Stephen Cotterill, the two archbishops that lead the Church of England, said there were no possible excuses, no rationalisations, for our Church's failure to share the love of God and to value each and every person. They added, "We sincerely apologise for our failures and want to reach out to those who are still suffering from the pain and misery they endured. We extend this apology to wider family members affected from this past abuse. We are so sorry that this ever happened. It was not your fault and you are not to blame." The Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said today that the mood music from the UK government over resolving issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol had changed fundamentally ahead of talks resuming this week. EU and UK officials will hold their first talks in over 7 months this week on the protocol, the part of the Brexit deal that governs the trading arrangements of Northern Ireland. Since formal discussions were last held in February, both sides have proceeded with legal action against the other, and the UK government is pressing ahead with legislation that would unilaterally scrap key parts of the protocol. Both sides have agreed to engage this week. This is a very welcome change of course that the UK government is now engaging now more seriously as opposed to moving ahead with unilateral action, Mr Coveney told reporters. It remains to be seen whether this new-look British government is willing to make compromises to get a deal done, but certainly the mood music has changed quite fundamentally. We welcome that, and we will work on not only relationships to rebuild trust, but also work on solutions in a practical way. Mr Coveney said he would meet the British Foreign Minister James Cleverly, who took up his post last month under the new Prime Minister Liz Truss, for dinner in London on Thursday, ahead of a British-Irish intergovernmental conference on Friday. OPEC and its allies have agreed to a bigger-than-expected cut in oil production targets, despite significant pressure from the US. The OPEC Plus group of oil-producing nations signed up to a cut in output of 2 million barrels a day, surpassing predictions earlier this week of cuts of between 1 and 1.5 million barrels, squeezing supplies in an already tight market. Joe Biden's administration had hoped to persuade Middle Eastern nations not to curb supplies, which could further increase fuel prices and add to soaring inflation. Although oil prices have fallen from the highs of about $130 a barrel seen in the summer, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine tightened supplies, motorists in the UK and the US have still experienced high prices at the pump, exacerbating the cost of living crisis. OPEC Plus has in recent months failed to achieve its planned output increases owing to underinvestment in oil fields by some OPEC members and by losses in Russian output. The invasion of Ukraine has upended world oil markets, with Western nations shunning Russian oil and exporters in Russia instead increasingly shipping to India and China. If oil prices rise sharply, the White House could opt to release additional barrels from US Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or to curb domestic exports of refined products to calm prices. However, the White House has indicated that a decision to tap the reserve is not imminent. The OPEC Plus meeting is taking place in person in Vienna for the first time since March 2020, when the COVID pandemic forced it online after a last-minute switch. Oil use has rebounded from the lows of the pandemic, although high prices and Chinese coronavirus outbreaks have hit 2022 growth projections. Legislation making it a criminal offence for anyone to supply fireworks or other pyrotechnic articles to a child or person under 18 comes into effect on the 10th of October. From the same date, attacks on emergency workers using fireworks or pyrotechnics will also become aggravating factors that can be taken into account when courts sentence offenders. The measures are set out in the Fireworks and Pyrotechnic Articles Scotland Act 2022, passed by our Parliament on the 29th of June. The key powers are being brought into force in advance of Bonfire Night and build on steps taken last year restricting the times fireworks can be used, when they can be bought, and the quantity. Work is progressing to enact other measures set out in the Act, including the introduction of a fireworks licensing scheme with mandatory safety training for people wishing to purchase and use fireworks, and introducing powers for local authorities to designate firework control zones. The Community Safety Minister, Ash Regan, said, "These important new powers have been delivered at pace, and make it a criminal offence for anyone to supply fireworks or other pyrotechnic articles to a child or person under the age of 18. Fireworks in the wrong hands can cause serious, life-changing injuries or even prove lethal. Preventing their supply in any way to under 18s is a wholly welcome step which will bring greater public safety across Scotland. A new study of a tiny Triassic fossil reptile first discovered over 100 years ago in the northeast of Scotland has revealed it to be a close relative of the species that would become pterosaurs, iconic flying reptiles of the age of the dinosaurs. In a new paper published in Nature, a team of scientists led by Dr. David Foffa, Research Associate at National Museums Scotland, and funded by the Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851, have used computed tomography to provide the first accurate whole skeleton reconstruction of Scleromochlus taylori. The results reveal new anatomical details that conclusively identify it as a close pterosaur relative. It falls within a group known as Pterosauromorpha, comprising an extinct group of reptiles called lagarpetids, together with pterosaurs. Living approximately 240 to 210 million years ago, lagarpetids were a group of relatively small, cat-sized active reptiles. Scleromochlus was smaller still at under 20 centimeters in length. The results support the hypothesis that the first flying reptiles evolved from small, likely bipedal, ancestors. The finding settles a century-long debate. There had previously been disagreement as to whether the reptile, Scleromochlus, represented an evolutionary step in the direction of pterosaurs, dinosaurs, or some other reptilian offshoot. The fossil of Scleromochlus is poorly preserved in a block of sandstone, which has made it difficult to study in sufficient detail to properly identify its anatomical features. The fossil is one of a group known as the Elgin reptiles, comprising Triassic and Permian specimens found in the sandstone of the Morayshire region of northeast Scotland around the town of Elgin. The specimens are held mostly in the collections of the National Museums of Scotland, Elgin Museum, and the Natural History Museum. The latter holds Scleromochlus, which was originally found at Lossiemouth. The Elgin reptiles. I'm sure that there's a joke in there about Douglas Ross. But that's all that we have for you this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you. Thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow evening with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please tune in and join us again then. On this day in 1922 saw the birth near Hamilton of Jock Stein, best remembered as manager of Celtic and our national team. Jock first worked in the mines and once told Hugh McIlvanney, "I've never been alongside better men. Mines were places where phonies or cheats couldn't survive for long." And in 1967, Mr. Stein said, "We must play as if there are no more games, no more tomorrows." Still is true today. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching. Please watch out for the Elgin reptiles and have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.